intelligent information about what's going on, but Ukraine was a trap, and the United States walked into it. Now we're seeing the quagmire. Next we will lose NATO. In Iraq, a similar thing has happened, but in the Arab world. A trap has been set. The United States is now walking into it. And the result is going to be very fuzzy and uncertain, but I can guarantee you it will not be favorable for the Obama administration, nor their relationship with the Pentagon. I don't know what's going to come of it. There's a lot of talk about, reworking some of the Iraq boundaries, national boundaries and borders. I don't know how much cooperation there will be for that. There's a lot of pressure for the Arab Shiites as opposed to the Persian Shiites. There's a lot of pressure with the Kurds in the north that have more Turkish tribal. There's a lot of conflict, a lot of pressure, but when you get right down to it, the United States funded and supplied and trained both sides of the conflict.
Hear, hear.
And now we're caught with the consequence of that. What we trained secretly and funded secretly to attack Syria is now attacking, as our allies, they are attacking our other allies in Iraq. So the United States is on both sides, caught in the middle, walking into a trap. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I can guarantee you it will not be favorable for the gay prince in the White House.
Well, let's move on to how this affects, and your overarching theme is the world is going away from the dollar. The BRICS countries are setting up their own currency swaps and currency trades. We're moving towards a yuan-based currency. It's happening around the globe where they're going to have clearinghouses for yuan, for the Chinese currency, Germany, London. Now you're saying that maybe Argentina may get drawn into this in terms of getting some debt relief. They'll become part of the BRICS countries. They'll move away from the dollar. Tell me where we are with the moving away from the dollar, the acceleration of non-use of the U.S. dollar.
Well, it's becoming a parade. The States is going to succeed in isolating 90% of the world. And in doing so, will isolate itself. Okay, you can't sanction the whole world that does not want to use the dollar. If you do that, what you do is, what the end result is that you define the non-dollar world. You catalyze it, you crystallize it, you bring it into shape, you enable its birth, and that's what the United States is doing. The dollar, to begin with, we must focus on the fundamental. The dollar is toxic. The world operates with the dollar in trade. We have quantitative easing and unsterilized bond monetization. In other words, using printing press money to sustain treasury bond demand. That's toxic. That goes against everything central bankers taught for 70 years until 2008. All right, so now they're really purveyors of heresy. You've got the 0% interest rate that makes the dollar toxic because all the assets are mispriced. You have Wall Street fraud that's largely permitted. Okay, they do have some, $5 billion here, $2 billion there for penalties and fines and lawsuits and bond investor restitution. Okay, that's minor. Let's say $150 billion initial settlement for LIBOR, followed by 15 more, totaling well over 2 or 3 trillion in damages. We're nowhere near that. So we've got derivatives, Wall Street fraud, QE, 0% interest rate, war, endless war to defend the dollar. We're to the point now where it's quite clear. If nations announce that they want to get off the dollar, they're declared terrorists and we wage war against them. It's as simple as that. I've been saying that for 3 years, and now it's finally sinking in to the meatheads out there in the public who do not subscribe to the hat-trick letter. I give credit to the 10% of the crowd that is aware of what's going on. I'm harshly critical of the morons out there who really are becoming qualified fascists without even knowing it. But, Greg, there are dozens and dozens of details. I think with the notes, I indicated them to you, and you're anxious to get to them. It's going to take a while to cover, so please interrupt me as you wish. But London and Frankfurt are being set up by China to be RMB hubs. Now, you're going to hear RMB a lot. It stands for renminbi. RMB means renminbi, which translates to people's money. It's like communist word for money. Okay.
Chinese.
The equals RMB. It's not a movement from one to the other. They are one and the same. Okay. So China is setting up London, luring them to become an RMB hub, to do Chinese government bond trading. London loves this. They're a financial center. They offer China, oh, we got 12 big banks that can help you do that. Big investment banks with a century of experience. Okay, China likes that. London likes that. China's using that to, I believe, splinter England off support for NATO activity against Russia. You cannot piss off China without getting a response from Russia, and vice versa. This is called the U.S. isolating Russia. It's moronic. They've got 12 time zones. Yeah, I love saying that. They're the major supplier for oil, gas, aluminum, tin, iron, silver, titanium, strontium, vanadium, cobalt. Should I go on? I mean, rare earth metals. I mean, they've got them in China. They have them both. Okay, they have it all. They have a lot of resources. You can't isolate Russia when they join at the hip with China. You can't incur huge losses against Russia when they just turn and say, well, you don't want our... We'll develop the pipeline to Korea. We'll develop the pipeline to Japan. This is getting really out of control, away from the U.S. favor. I believe, this is my forecast and what the Voice has really assured me of. It's not even a promise for him. It said this is the reality that's coming to light. Frankfurt, Germany will eclipse London as a Chinese RMB trading hub. And why is that? Because first of all, you've got 3,000 German companies doing business in Russia. You've got several hundred doing business in China. China wants the technology transfer from Germany, not from England. Okay, Premier Lee is now in London today and yesterday talking to the British. He's not there for a technology transfer, as the press announces. He's there to tie England's hands, convince them to quit the support for NATO. Well, England has almost nothing to offer China except the London Financial Center RMB hub. But China's got the second source in Frankfurt, so they really don't need London. London's begging for it. Oh, this is so complex. Russia and China, they signed their Holy Grail deal. A lot of complaints from the idiots on the, currency terms and payment terms. Well, yeah, because we don't even know if the dollar's going to exist next year. We don't know how the gold-backed currencies are going to arrive. We don't know whether the COMEX is going to finally be forced into a shutdown because they don't have any gold anymore, and for over a full stinking year haven't delivered any gold to any private clients outside Wall Street. They're doing cash delivery. Okay, we don't know a lot of things, Greg, so it's very hard for the Holy Grail deal to nail down price and nail down currency and all this. We don't know how the world's going to even look in 6 months. But there are so many other events. I mean, we give you a chance here.
And this is why that our allies, quote unquote, the people in NATO, they're saying, hey, we're forced into doing this. If the dollar blows up, we have to continue to trade. Some of your notes said even U.S. companies have increased their yuan payment to China in trade, that even U.S. companies are trading, buying goods from China in yuan. They're not using dollars. I mean, that to me, even though it's a couple of percent, but that to me is, boy, where does that say we're going?
Well, it means that even in the United States, companies like Walmart and Target and Costco and even Staples, my old employer, they're going to be settling in RMB. Critically necessary and urgent in the United States is that the U.S. set up a Chinese yuan swap facility. And we don't have that right now. The U.S. needs to set up a Chinese yuan facility like Australia has, like Switzerland has, like Paris has, like London has, like Frankfurt has. All these nations have an RMB facility for doing trade, bilateral trade. It's like 3 or 4 Chinese banks and 3, 4, or 5 other banks like in Australia or other banks like in Brazil. They work out an agreement where the group of Chinese banks versus the group of Brazilian banks, for instance, they settle their trade on a monthly basis or quarterly basis. They might carry over some debt for a credit for the next segment. Who knows? I don't know how they manage it. It's up to them. But the U.S. needs to do that, and I think we might see it in San Francisco because it's a financial center. It's Silicon Valley. It's investment. It's the investment capital center of the whole West Coast, which is where the Chinese ports are operating. The Chinese own the Long Beach, California port. They own the Vancouver ports. They own the Port Richey, British Columbia ports. So you've got 2.4% now of U.S. business trade with RMB. Now that's according to the SWIFT data. I like to point out the irony that SWIFT was used as a weapon against Iran and European nations for the sanctions against Iran for the flimsy BS reason of nuclear development. No, once again, Iran wanted to trade outside the dollar, therefore they were branded as terrorists. Well, what's going to happen is the United States is going to get branded as terrorists because they're operating Al-Qaeda. And that's becoming well known except to the sub-90 IQ American public, of which I think we've got, 70 million. Sub-90 IQ. We got so many other things. We have the Chinese and Russians capturing the Persian Gulf now. Kuwait and Abu Dhabi are in talks with India for a crude oil strategic inventory to hold 2 million tons of oil. Just like the United States, they're going to put it in caverns. Russia and Qatar are working on joint technology for liquefied natural gas. And the Qatar Foundation, they got a name, I can't remember it, it's their sovereign wealth fund. They're going to put in $2 billion for Russian projects as a goodwill gesture. Remember, Qatar is an enemy of the Russian position in Syria. The Russians are also building ties with Japan in major deals for Gazprom pipeline extensions. Russia's working out deals for major Iranian railway links. Russia's working with the Koreas. I say Koreas because they're talking to North Korea. They're throwing them a bone. These inbred freaks in Pyongyang, North Korea, they're being tossed a bone by Russia to help improve the pipelines to go to South Korea because it's cheaper than going through the ocean. We've got so many other things going. We've got Russia and Syria working on arms deals, and Russia just assured them that they will assist in a major way for the reconstruction of Syria after all the U.S. and its al-Qaeda attacks. But really, the big story, I think, regarding the dollar usage and abandonment of the dollar usage is that Germany is going to use its technology and export trade as a leverage to win the RMB hub and to force Germany into a pivot east. We keep hearing about pivoting east. Gazprom and the Kremlin are pivoting east because they've lost their European customer. The United States wants Gazprom to lose its European customer, and just overnight we had an explosion in eastern Ukraine. Flames for the pipelines that transit Ukraine and feed Eastern Europe that go to Western Europe also. Ukraine, I just think Putin, Gazprom, and the Kremlin have shown extraordinary patience while the U.S. and NATO has conducted mercenary-led coup d'etat, complete with violence and thefts of their central bank and $70 billion in oligarch money. The people who took over with the coup d'etat in Kiev stole all the family money of the previous leaders, stole lots of government money, hid it all in Switzerland. The U.S. went in there and stole the central bank, 33 tons of gold. Putin and the Kremlin have shown extraordinary patience while pointing out that Ukraine has not paid its bills in the last couple of years. Now they're saying, well, you want to continue. It's a pay-go policy. Pay as you go. You want to pay, you want the supplies for this summer? Well, you got to pay for the second quarter. You need to pay in advance for the third quarter starting July. And furthermore, all their South Stream pipeline projects for construction have been halted and interrupted by the United States.
No, well, but wait a minute. Let me interrupt here. I just want to make sure that, so you're saying that the U.S. is stopping production of pipelines. I mean, isn't that cutting off the supply to Europe? Isn't Russia just going to say, okay, fine, we'll send our gas somewhere else?
Well, it's pretty hard to do that, but that is the theme. Yes, the U.S. is interfering with the South Stream pipeline construction. Now, bear in mind that 2 years ago, the North Stream was completed, and it basically supplies Germany. It supplies the northern European nations. It supplies Poland, Lithuania, the Baltic states. It might supply a bit of, say, Denmark and maybe. But the northern quadrant of Europe, that was from the Nord Stream. It's in operation. But 10 years ago, the Kremlin and Gazprom realized Ukraine's a big problem. We can't have the entire European flow going through Ukraine because we can't control it anymore. Now they're being infiltrated by the U.S. and they're being courted by the NATO. And so back a year ago, they started construction on the South Stream. And that goes through Serbia and the old Yugoslavia and Romania and Bulgaria, and has branches all over the place. Not just one pipeline. It's like a series of pipelines. It's like, the sewer line through a city, except it supplies oil and gas. Not so much oil. They got their own oil pipeline. So yes, the United States has been interfering with the construction and supply of gas to Europe, telling them an insane claim that the United States, through their fracking gas volume in North America, will supply Europe and make up for their difference, when the United States is revealing piece by piece that their fracking doesn't have anywhere near the reserves. There's a giant Monterey deposit in California of supposed shale oil, 6% write down. So they lied by 25-fold of what they had in their reserves. In my old hometown area in western Pennsylvania, there was something, I think, oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, there was some firm that operated for 2 years. Now they're done. That's it. They got some contaminated groundwater. They extracted some fracked gas, and they're done. So the United States doesn't even have the ability to supply. They talk about supplying Europe, but they don't even have the ability to deliver it to Europe. They don't have LNG ships to deliver. There's inadequate European ports to accept. They don't have pipelines across the Atlantic. What kind of idiot devised this plan? I'll tell you who. The guy sitting in the White House.
Well, tell me about this split between the Pentagon and the Langley people. You were talking about there's a split. Maybe there is a ray of hope that the people in the Pentagon are saying, hey, what are you doing?
I don't get into the military and political discussions much, but just keep in mind that the entire Ukrainian and entire Syrian projects on the military side were not done by the Pentagon.
Oh, boy.
They were done by Langley.
Wow, that's a huge...
So, okay, now the Pentagon is saying we don't support all these moves. We don't want to expand the war. We don't want confrontation with Russia and China.
Hang on. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. So they don't want confrontation, so...
And that's all I'll say.
Oh, okay. That wasn't a break. That was it. They don't want okay.
That's it. I'm done.
Sorry, I thought that was going to be a break in the audio. Don't want... okay, fine. Let's move on. Let's go on to, what does this mean if all these projects mean, all what you're describing, we've got 0% interest rates in the European Union. Some people think they're coming, well, we already have effectively, when you can't factor in inflation, 0% or negative rates. They're doing that in Europe. Isn't that a desperation move? How long can this keep going on? Isn't this just a prop-up move for Europe, for Draghi to install negative interest rates? And aren't those negative interest rates coming over to the United States?
Well, yeah, and you have to think of what it means. It means that they've failed. It's as simple as that. A 0% rate and bond easing, bond purchasing through monetary easing. Greenspan was very clear in teaching about that. It's something you install for 3 or 6 months, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and then you get off it because it's very dangerous. It's very destructive. We got it for almost 4 years. Yeah. So this is a signal of failure, and the Bundesbank. Very sharp warnings to Draghi, head of the European Central Bank, saying we don't want this negative interest rate, and we don't want you to embark on bond monetization. I think Germany is setting up the Euro Central Bank for departing from the euro. They're giving the justification for it, Greg.
If Germany goes, the euro's gone.
Well, yeah, but you're still going to have the southern nations that are not dragged along. And if the southern nations like France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Greece are stuck with their own euro without the main tractor, the main truck of Germany, Austria, Finland, and the Netherlands, well, I foresee a 50% devaluation in the euro and huge inflation. But I'm hearing that some rumors that France might get off the euro as a test case ordered by their masters in Germany. So that would be pretty interesting. I gotta try to steer this a little bit, Greg. The Belgian bulge of U.S. Treasury bonds and the Saudis announcing a sovereign wealth fund, to me, signals two main channels for the BRICS developing their gold central bank. And I'd like to cover that some if we could.
They're selling their treasuries. Let's hear it.
Bulge, because that's a little older. We had in the last 6 months or 5 months a bulge appear in the Belgian central bank account for treasury bonds. It went from something like 40 or 50 billion up to close to 400, 370, 380 billion. Well, gee, that's almost the size of the Belgian economy.
Yeah, I think the Belgian economy is 480 billion, I believe.
Yeah,
that's huge.
So what's going on? The knee-jerk was, well, gee, maybe the Fed is hiding some of its bond monetization and doing so by using the central bank in Belgium, which is the seat for the European Union and the Parliament. It's not the seat for their central bank. That's in Frankfurt, Germany. All right, and then a lot of hubbub came and commotion that, well, look at that. The Russian central bank holdings of treasuries went down when Belgium's went up. Okay, well, that looks like it might be part of it too. what I'm hearing and piecing together, and what some of my little brain trust, including the voice and Euro Raj, a London banker, we're concluding that no, that's the obvious part. The hidden part is that the Saudis, India, and some other BRICS nations are putting up treasury because they want to attract other BRICS nations to put up treasury bonds.
They're selling out, and they're doing it through places like Belgium.
Exactly. And they're trying to do that as a sourcing leveraged contract for sourcing gold.
Oh, boy.
So what you're seeing in Belgium is probably a giant BRICS central bank sourcing of gold in progress. It's a project in progress. Okay, notice that it went up a good bit in the last couple of months, not the most recent month. Well, some say, well, gee, look at that. They're adding to it. Well, maybe it's a margin call. And these BRICS nations who want to source, let's just say they want to source round figures, 5,000 to 10,000 tons. Well, it's not easy to do. And if you've got your position that's leveraged and the gold price went down through naked shorting, once again by London and Wall Street, naked shorting, selling metal that don't have, not delivering on contracts that are legally binding. If they have a margin call, what do the BRICS nations do? Well, they put up more collateral. They don't abandon their trade, so it increases the size.
They put up treasuries.
They put up treasuries. Furthermore, suppose as 2 months pass, they decide, or contributions from Brazil, and even Japan has quietly pitched in. Let's increase our position. It's not a margin call. It's addition to the position. I'm told that Japan is doing 10 times the conversion to gold compared to what they announced in the public. They announced, I think it was 25 or 30 tons in a recent month. I'm told it was 200 tons in a single month.
Isn't the world just going to run out of gold? I mean, I keep hearing that how they're not delivering in COMEX and they're for a year. You've been saying that. Where are they getting the gold from? That China itself has taken the mining production of the entire world in a single year. That they're importing massive amounts of gold, as is everybody else, is what you're telling me. When are they going to run out? When do we have a moment when nobody's selling gold? We're done. When is that moment coming?
I think we're pretty much there. The COMEX doesn't have any gold. GLD is raiding their gold, denying investors of gold on redemption of shares. London's out of gold. Why do you think all this heat comes to Ukraine? Well, it's timed with London running out of gold. Okay, people say the world's out of gold. No, it's not. No, it's not. The sovereign governments are out of gold.
In the West.
London LBMA and Wall Street's COMEX, Chicago COMEX, they're out of gold. Shanghai's not. Dubai's not. Turkey's not. No, what you're seeing now is the corrupt West and their sovereign official offices and markets are running out of gold. And therefore the dollar is ready to die. Why do you think that the U.S. parted ways with Saudi? Well, because first of all, they're running low on oil reserves, but the U.S. and London have been stealing the Saudis' gold. So why would the Saudis continue playing ball with the Americans and British? The Americans and British are stealing the Saudis' gold. And now you've got this Credit Suisse case, which is forcing them to admit guilt for secret accounts for tax evasion in the U.S. All right, fine. They're trying to force them into a merger with UBS because U.S. controls UBS better so they can steal, steal the Saudi gold. Why is BNP Paribas under investigation for violations of sanctions regarding Iran and Sudan? So they can force a merger with Societe Generale, which is more tied in with the derivatives. So the two big investigations and fines and penalties and not court cases, but prosecution cases, Swiss and BNP Paribas, are to defend the gold market and defend the derivatives market. Okay, we got a huge story that I think went totally over the heads of 95% of even the gold community observers when the Saudis announced an independent sovereign wealth fund to begin operations on Saudi soil that was totally separate from their central bank, and they were going to start converting treasury bonds to gold. Okay, they've got $760 billion in their sovereign wealth fund. Let's just say a quarter of it, a third of it, is property. Like, London office buildings in Paris, in Rome, right. Madrid. They own a lot of property. Well, let's just say, $500 billion worth of the Saudi sovereign wealth fund is in paper, is in UK gilts, is in Euro bonds, is in Japanese government bonds, is in Chinese government bonds, is in US Treasury bonds. The majority of the Saudi wealth is in U.S. Treasury bonds and Wall Street bank stocks and London bank stocks. The Chinese already own Barclays. Now the Saudis are disinvesting. They're diversifying out of their treasuries. And I believe they're talking a lot to the Chinese. Look at the last meeting in Beijing with the Saudis and the Chinese. Just this month, in June, there's another huge meeting with the Chinese and the Saudis. They're trying to make it a pan-Arab conference for joint cooperation. I believe the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, operating independently of their central bank, is going to be dumping treasury bonds for the entire Persian Gulf. They've got $2.37 trillion in the entire Persian Gulf sovereign wealth fund. Let's just say 2/3 of it is in paper.
Jim, I know they'd like to do it, but you're talking about a sudden collapse. I mean, that's going to be not covert. That's going to have to be overt. And how would the dollar sustain that? I mean, if they're getting ready to do that, is this why you're saying that the dollar is, what did you say exactly? You said ready to die? Is this why you're saying the dollar's ready to die? Is that everybody's going to be dumping it?
I think the funeral march starts this year. I've been saying the year's not going to close out the same way it starts. What do you think the Belgian bulge is? You said overt. Is the Belgian bulge overt? Of course it is.
Yeah.
Is it properly interpreted? No. I'm helping for the interpretation.
Got it.
I mean, there's more to the Belgian bulge. It could be pigs nations struggling with new Basel requirements for movement of funds out of Ireland. Let's move it out of Portugal. Let's put it in Belgium where it's more portable, like a warehouse. You've got other things involved too. It's very complicated, but I like to focus on the main story, and I believe it's the BRICS coming to the fore with a gold sourcing for a gigantic 5,000 to 10,000 ton central bank supply that will eventually be over 20,000 tons.
And let's bring it back here to the United States. This is USA Watchdog. Right now we're seeing 20%, according to the USDA. We're on track for a 22% food inflation this year. We're already at 10%, according to the United States Department of Agriculture. You're seeing, fuel prices sticking around $3.50 that may be heading up with this conflict in Iraq, and I've already talked about that. So what is it going to look like for the man on the street here in the U.S.? What is he going to start seeing more of when this overarching global plan to move away from the dollar starts really getting into picking up speed, even more speed?
Well, I think they're going to see pink slips for their employers. I think they're going to see higher prices for fuel and food. And I think they're going to start to see advertisements for jobs for Chinese-run companies on U.S. soil.
Wow, that's big.
We're losing our country. I think we've already lost our country. I remember back in I think it was around 1998 or 2002, the United States had over half of its debt held by foreign countries. And when I was young, my father used to say, well, Jim, it's debt we owe ourselves. So I reminded my father, this is debt now that is a majority foreign held, so we're going to lose our ability to make decisions independently now. When decisions are made on various fronts, I think we consult the Chinese. I think the Chinese have been consulted regarding the Ukraine action. I think the Chinese have pretty much ordered the divorce between Saudis and the United States. We're losing control of our country. There are already these independent industrial parks springing up all over the United States. I shouldn't say all over. In several spots in the United States. A couple in Idaho, California, upstate New York. They're buying up Detroit. Detroit's going to become an industrial park. Detroit is cutting off water now to a good portion of their citizens and their homes. Water. It's a charred ruin. China's buying it up. China bought a Westinghouse facility in Greater Pittsburgh, my hometown, where I grew up. I moved off to Boston for 20 years and lost my accent, which is a good thing because I sounded a bit like a West Virginian. That's how Dan Marino has a West Virginia hillbilly Pittsburgh accent. You see him on NFL Sunday. Dan Marino, the Miami quarterback. That's a Pittsburgh accent. I lost it. But, you know, China is going to continue. They're going to be responsible for the reindustrialization of the United States. What caused the lost industry to the United States? Go back to the 1980s. It wasn't the shock of oil. It was the impact of trade unions. AFL-CIO, steel workers, electrical workers, coal workers. So before you know it, we started importing British and Norwegian and Japanese steel, Korean steel. Well, then we had the environmental movement, which raised our cost structure. So with labor unions and environmental movements, the United States corporations decided we need to start outsourcing. And with that, the U.S. lost a lot of income. And we started our stupidity of asset bubbles. Can you, honestly, let's just focus for a minute. Since 2002, the United States, lacking industry, developed the housing bubble, developed the stock bubble, and urged people to draw money off their stock accounts, draw money on home equity loans, support the consumption-based economy, and we can have a healthy economy. Try reading about that anywhere in good, viable, bona fide expert economics textbooks. 60. It's total insanity. I called it abysmal. And even Greenspan warned that this is dangerous. Yeah. But he promoted it. He promoted our own destruction by giving the Americans what they wanted. Easy money. If you want to destroy a nation, all you have to do is give it easy money, let the inflation ravage it, and before you know it, you lose your industry. And as Thomas Jefferson warned, you wake up one morning and the majority of your people do not own their own homes, they're owned by the bankers. And that's what we got right now. We got private equity firms running around trying to spark a home housing market revival in cities like Miami and Phoenix, the most damaged. Private equity firms buying 100 properties at a time through hidden proxy agents. This is not a housing market rebound. It's an artificial elite confiscation event. So what should Americans expect? What I've been warning. Price inflation, supply shortage, and ATM disruptions for cash. And violence at all three. Erupting gasoline stations with fireballs like what you see in Ukraine. Erupting violence at supermarkets like at Walmart. The 300-pounders are going to be fighting over that last steak. You're going to have arguments and fights and robbery. Falling into the third world. This is what I forecasted in '08. People called me crazy. I also forecasted U.S. government debt default. How are we doing on that? We don't default on debt. We just have 80% of the debt being financed by the printing press, Weimar style. I mean, Americans don't even know what the dollar is. 90% of Americans don't know how to answer the question, what is the dollar as a financial instrument in global markets?
It's a debt note.
They don't know. They don't know.
It's a debt note.
I go further to say, Greg, that 90% of the Americans that I talk to, and this is very common among human beings, but 90% of the Americans I ask, what's the difference between legal tender and the dollar as concepts? They have no idea. In other words, they don't know what money is.
Yeah.
We've been dumbed down on what money is to the point that we've lost our nation, lost our industry, lost our viability, lost our rule of law, and now we've become a fascist state relying on attacks of other nations that want to abandon the dollar. So what the United States is going to succeed in is isolating 90% of the world and therefore isolating itself. It's already happening in spades. And you can't stop it. And what you really need for the United States to do is abolish the federal government. I'm not saying this as a revolutionary. I'm saying this as a patriot who believes we need to remove the vampires, Satanists, and warmongers who control Washington and split it up into 6 territories where it can be managed in a healthy way with an honest gold-backed currency where we can make a rebound and do so quickly with Chinese help. The trend 5 years from now is going to be, hey, I just got a loan for my car. I got better terms than the American banks. I got it from a Chinese bank. Hey, I just got a new job. I mean, it doesn't have much in the way of fringe benefits, but I'm happy to be working for my new Chinese employer. We've lost our country.
Dr. Jim Willie, with that, we will close. Thank you for your assessment of what's going on. You never disappoint. Thank you for clarifying some things, giving us a different perspective about what's going on in Belgium. Of course, you are the editor of the Hat Trick Letter, which can be found on goldenjackass.com. Again, Dr. Jim Willie, thank you so much for being on usawatchdog.com.
It's a pleasure. I wish there were better circumstances, but you have to report reality, right?
You can't come back until you know what's wrong. Thank you again, Dr. Jim Willie.
Okay, my pleasure.